Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chassidus in the morning. Kuntres Hatefila. Down to the last two parakim, Ches and Tes. We've gone through the whole thing. Okay, basically, we'll jump straight into it. We've been talking about a lot of different subjects. Basically, talking also about how to learn Chassidus properly, which is meaning to think about what we're saying or learning, not just to learn it, but once we've learned it, we have to think about what it means and how to apply it to ourselves and put in the effort to do that. And together with that, we talked about we have to try to work on ourselves and recognize what needs to be, fixed, and pay attention during davening and realize davening's opportunity to connect to God, which will help us have a totally different Judaism. Perek Ches, and we talked a lot about Das, of course, which is what we've been talking about. Perek Ches is talking about working on ourselves and understanding how to work on ourselves. Okay, top of page 78. Refining the animal soul. In Chabad philosophy, the basis of prayer is to refine man's human and animalistic habits and improve one's character. This can be attained when one's manner of meditation is like that of Das. I'll explain above chapter 5. So the basis of Chabad, one of the main focuses in Chabad, is to work on ourselves. What does it mean to work on ourselves? It means we unfortunately build not such good character traits. Over time, we might get angry at things, or we might have habits that aren't good. We might speak to people not nicely. We might think about ourselves not nicely. We might look at the world around us not nicely. We might have issues in why God does certain things, and it goes everywhere. There's a lot of things the way we live our lives that it's not to the ultimate way we should. And part of being a chassid, the purpose is to transform ourselves. As Gordon in the beginning on his Tanya shiur, and so he starts like 2 days ago. I was listening to it. It's beautiful. So he said basically, the Alter comes and says, you're not stuck. You're not stuck to your habits. Take control of your life, and don't say this is just how I was. This is just how it is, but change it. Put some effort in and see and work on it. And the Alter is giving you a sefer. And this is what Chassidus, part of what Chassidus is to give you the ability to take control of your life. And when we say we have to refine our animal soul, it means we have to take control of our life and make the decisions, and not just let the decision be run. We don't want to run riot within us, but we're taking control of what's going on and making the decisions. And this is what we're talking about. And the way to do it is through das, meaning it's through, and a lot what we're going to say here, I've said this many times, and I'll continue saying this, that we have to take these things in context. And basically what he's saying is through das, meaning das is the idea of taking the Maamer that you know and applying it, connecting to it, and trying to sense it, and not just intellectually, but feel it. And when you do that, so you're meaning through saying to yourself, well, what does this mean for me? Like, what am I meant to be taking away from this? What's the take-home message for this Maamer, and how I'm meant to live with that? And that's what he's saying. And that's das, and through that's how you work on yourself. So let's see. Many engage in the study of Chassidus, and they ought to, and possess good intellectual aptitude, yet they minimize their involvement in prayer. Out of laziness, they neglect to exert themselves during their worship. So very much the Rebbe Rashab connects working on das, on connecting to the Maamer in davening, which would mean that when you're davening, you spend some time thinking about the Maamer that you learned, and you think about how do I work on this? How do I work on what this issue is? And that's what he's saying. So not necessarily we have the time to do it during davening, but that das aspect we still have, and we still should do it. So he's saying people, like, they learn Chassidus well, but they don't put in the effort to have the das. That's what he's saying. Generally, these individuals pray in their accustomed manner, like the average person. Occasionally, they do meditate during their prayers when their hearts are stirred, but only in a general and abbreviated way that doesn't count as avodah at all, as discussed above. So they might even go over a Maamer in their heads, but it's a very abbreviated way. It's not in this way of das. They're not trying to connect to the Maamer. They're just reminding themselves of what they learned, what the Maamer is saying, but they don't actually think about it in terms of what does that mean to me? What am I meant to take away? And a lot of people don't ever learn the Maamer in that way, unfortunately. As a result, all their effort in their study of Chassidus is utterly futile, God forbid. And so unfortunately, and this is sort of the reality for a lot of people, after many years of learning Chassidus, it just doesn't have an effect anymore, and it doesn't really have a true long-lasting effect. And they're like, and they just, they sort of mature out of it, so to speak. God forbid. But the problem is, it's not that they matured out of it; it's because they never applied the Chassidus that they're learning, and they never got taught. Unfortunately, I think they never got taught it, which I don't know why. But people aren't connecting to what they're learning, and so therefore the result is that's not going to work. A lasting effect. So how do we have a lasting effect? Besides the fact that the energy that animates one's involvement in the study of Torah and the performance of mitzvahs, and that guarantees their endurance, emanates specifically from prayer. Besides the fact that it's through davening. If you have to daven, meaning you have to realize, and this is sort of like an important point that I want people to get from this, is that davening is an integral part of our lives. It's not just this hassle we have to do as well, And when I was in seminary, okay, so that's how I had time to daven. Now I don't have time to daven, and just daven is burden. But it could be that you can only daven for 5 minutes. It's not the amount of time; it's the thought process behind it. And if you realize you only have literally 5 minutes, or even less, you just have enough time to say Shema, even, let's say, that's fine. But when you say it, and even for those 2 seconds that you're going to say it, the emotion that comes behind it, the feeling, the thoughts that come behind it, make a very big difference. So because when you do have the proper thoughts, that transforms your Torah mitzvahs. As explained in Tanya, love and awe are the roots of the 248 positive and 365 negative commandments. Like it says in chapter 4 of Tanya, that the source for your doing positive mitzvahs and refraining from the negative mitzvahs is connected with the love and awe that you have to God. Similarly, prayer prepares a person so that his study of Torah is proper, and so that he's able to sense vitality and light during its study. So therefore, when you want to do a mitzvah like learning Torah, it's only going to work if you have that connection that you've built through your davening, because the davening is meant to bring you a love and an awe of God. This is why prayer is compared figuratively to the 18 vertebrae of the spine that support the entire body, as explained in Likutei Torah. And this is why davening is like this, like the 18 vertebrae in your back, like Shon Esrei. Like it says in Likutei Torah, Lohi bit aven. And just like the spine holds you up and makes you straight, so too davening properly makes you straight. Aside from all the above, the knowledge and understanding of godliness that a person has acquired through his study of Chassidus only endures when it is engraved and sensed by his mind and heart in prayer. Like we said about us, it's sensed that only through putting in the effort to not just the learning of Chassidus, but to the connecting with the Chassidus you're learning, will it last. And that's why a lot of people don't connect to the Chassidus learning, and therefore it doesn't last. And therefore it's a hard and it's a struggle. It's understandable. It's like I had a friend that he left Crown Heights, and he was called me up one year. I think it was before Gimel Tammuz or Yutis Kislev. He called me. It was Yutis Kislev the first time he called me, and he said, "I'm not in the mood," and he was like bummed about it. But he's like, I don't care. But he did care, because that's why he was calling me, because it bothered him. He didn't know what to do about it. And so I said to him, one of the things I said to him was like, listen, you have to understand that if you have a nefesh b'hamis and you're constantly feeding nefesh b'hamis and you're not feeding nefesh l'kis, what do you think is going to happen? It's not like you're not going to magically stay connected if you don't put in the effort to connect. You're not going to stay in shape if you don't do the exercise. If you stop doing exercise and you eat, fatty foods and soft drinks all day, what do you think is going to happen? And this is what it sort of is. I was telling him, and so what we're saying here is that it's not enough just to say I'm going to come to shul now. If you don't learn and you don't put in the effort, not just to actually learn, but to think about what you're learning and to try to pay attention a little bit when you're davening and pay attention to your connection to God, then it's not going to really last. Without this, the matter is forgotten and lost. Page 80, top. And all his exertion in studying to comprehend godliness is for naught, God forbid. And unfortunately, if you don't try to connect to what you're learning, so it's not going to last. Accordingly, the verse says, why is the purchase price of wisdom in the hands of the fool when he has no sense? Meaning you're learning, but you're not connecting to it. So you're like, it's foolish. For though a person studies laboriously to acquire wisdom and understanding, so you put in the effort to learn the Chassidus and to understand what it means. But if he doesn't engrave the words in his mind and heart through the surface of the heart, this is prayer. But if you don't try to connect to the Chassidus you're learning and try to have this this sense perception of it, this feeling of what you're learning, then within a short passage of time, the matter is entirely lost. Now, in the brackets here, it's a little bit of a powerful statement. He goes, and he inherits a double portion of Gehenna. Meaning, so he doesn't really explain why a double portion. He brings it from different places, but I think what he's trying to say is that, like my friend, if you're not learning, you're not davening, you're not doing anything, what are you end up going to be? So one year he called me and he said, Yutis Kislev, he doesn't want to go to the Fabringen. He doesn't care. He wants to sit down and have a beer and have some and have a steak and watch TV. But he felt bad. The next year he comes to me and he tells me he doesn't care at all, but he cares. And sort of the path just leads down. Like, what do you think is going to happen? So then, struggling to daven, struggling to do things. So then, when Gehenna is not a punishment; it's a purification process. That's what he says in the footnote, that it's basically perjury when a soul may be sent after death to become purified from the sins committed during the lifetime on earth. That's what he's saying. If you don't do this, you won't connect to the Chassidus. So then the chances of you holding back from doing Averis is very difficult. So you're probably going to have to, when you're finished, you're going to have to go to Gehenna just to clean yourself up from all the Averis you've done. So therefore, it's important to learn Chassidus properly. And by the way, my friend, he's doing much better because we have a neshama, a nefesh l'kis, doesn't let you get away with it, and he pushes you back. And so yeah, he's doing good. Just I wanted to say. For study per se consists of only understanding and comprehension, because when you're learning, you're just understanding. The essence of godliness is not engraved, thereby in the innerness and depth of one's soul. Just learning is not going to connect you to it. It's not going to connect with you to that extent that's like engraved within you. That's an experience. That Maamer, when you say that Maamer, you feel it. And one prays afterwards, reflect on the concept only generally and briefly, and how much more so if he doesn't meditate at all in the concept of his prayer. So if you don't think about the Maamer at all, or you think about it, but it's just in general terms, you don't actually think about how does this connect to me, and what I'm meant to be learning from this, and how is it meant to be changing my life, how am I meant to look at my life differently because of this. So with the passage of time, continuing this pattern, the concept will be abridged and its full scope gradually forgotten, to the point that the slightest trace will not remain. So therefore, you're not going to remember the Maamer. And you think to yourself, this is unfortunate reality for a lot of us. We think to ourselves, I have a bad mind. I'm not so smart as someone else. But it's not true. It's just you're not connected to it. You have no reason to just randomly remember random ideas. But when you connect to it, so then you remember it. But you're not remembering random ideas. You're remembering an experience. And you're remembering it because you're connecting to life experiences and the mashalim that are talking in your life, in your terms. So only when the details of the godly theme with all its minutiae are etched in the innermost recesses of his heart and mind, only when you're connected to it, it really talks to you, as explained above, in the very core, which is what the labor of prayer demands, which is the effort that you're putting in, that he's saying it's not easy necessarily. You have to put an effort, but that's the effort that you're doing to connect to what you're learning, as explained above. Will the godliness persist? Then the person will be close to godliness in a continuous manner. And that will cause you to be close, connected to it. And that's what he's saying. It's everything we've been saying above, sort of in different words. And this is what I love about this Kuntres, is that when you start to understand the point, he's giving you a lot of bina, a lot of different ways to understand it from different angles and bring up different issues and how to fix those issues, which is giving you a broad scope of what does it mean to daven properly and to learn properly. And what he's saying is essentially that it's important to learn and to connect to what you're learning and spend the time to think about it. And I was had a Yutis Kislev Mitzvah Shabbos, and we were discussing. So the guy was telling us, there's a Chassidic guy, and he was saying that like a few Shabbosim, there's normally a shiur going on, and for some reason the rabbi wasn't there. So he found some older gentleman, and he was like, "Come, you want to learn a Maamer?" I was like, "Yeah." So they learned a Maamer once, and they went through it. And when they finished, the old gentleman, he's like, "I have a custom to learn a Maamer twice." So he's like, "Okay, fine." So they went to learn it again. They finished the second time, and he goes, "I have like another custom to learn it a third time." So he's like, "Okay, fine." Like, "Okay, we'll do it." And he learned the third time, and then he said it again the fourth time. And so the guy was bringing, he said, like the connection that he had to that Maamer, it wasn't just that he learned it 4 times, but he connected to it. But it's easier when you've learned it so many times, and you understand everything, so you can start thinking about all the details and what does this really mean. And he said when he went to shiur to give it over by Mincha Mariv, he said everyone was listening. And normally, unfortunately, most people aren't listening because the person that's saying it doesn't really know it, or he doesn't really say it over very well. And you don't see that enthusiasm within him. But he said everyone was paying attention to what the Maamer was giving over, because he connected to it so well. And once you connect to it, it's easier to give it over, and people can see that relationship that you have to the Maamer and connect to it. Beautiful. This is a beautiful chapter. And yeah, continue on the bottom of page 80. Ox, lamb, and goats. Everyone should have a great, great day.